Welcome to Sports Talk with Tonsoni. I'm your host, Brian Tonsoni. College football season is just around the corner. It starts this week. While there are many traditions and programs to follow and watch on a given Saturday in the fall, there is only one program with the grandest of all traditions. This program hails from the northern part of Indiana. That program is Notre Dame. Tonight, we wake up to echoes from an off season and discuss Notre Dame football with two gentlemen who eat, sleep, and drink Notre Dame. Joining me tonight is 1989 Notre Dame graduate Chris Hagenow of Indianapolis and South Bend resident and Notre Dame supporter Jeff Stesiak. So sit back and enjoy this walk through memory lane.
As they throw forward pass, wait till you see the ball in the air, and then go and get it. And when they get it, boys, that's when we're going out there. That's when we go to.
Thing to do isn't to punch them, isn't to talk to them. There's only one way you get respect, and that's by looking somebody in the eye for 60 minutes. Go out there, hitch up your trousers and say, hey, baby, here I am now. Let me see you run through me now.
Chris Hagenow, native of LaPorte, Indiana, attended Notre Dame from 1985 to 1989, played the trombone in the Notre Dame marching band, and is currently during the day a lawyer, an avid fan of the Irish at night or on Saturday afternoons. Chris, welcome to the show. How are you feeling heading into the big game this Saturday?
Brian, thanks for having me. I'm always nervous before the first game because you never know what you're going to get with a college team. But always excited, especially with Michigan coming to town. It's always a great game. So I'm excited, but always a little nervous.
Jeff Stesiak, also a native of LaPorte and a college roommate of this host, began his love of Notre Dame football the day he took his first breath. He's also a lawyer by day and a huge fan of the Irish, known for his awesome tailgating. Jeff, welcome to the show. What is the mood in South Bend this week?
Unbelievable, Brian. You know, we're finally here. It's game day. College football's back. The atmosphere around campus, drove through there today. Unbelievable. You could just feel it in the air, and today's only Monday.
And so it's one of those weeks that takes way too long to get to Saturday because of the anticipation. So here we go with a little bit of Q&A with my guys from LaPorte. So how did each of you become fans of Notre Dame? Jeff, we'll start with you. What's your first recollection of following the Irish?
You know, it's an interesting story that probably will never, ever happen again, but it was at least 60 years ago, growing up in LaPorte. My mom sent a letter to the university asking for season football tickets and got them. And so we've had 2 season football tickets in our family ever since I can remember. And when things got tight in the family, we ended up holding a lottery between my 2 brothers and my uncle and decide who would go to which game. And so we've kept those season tickets in our family ever since then.
And your whole family gets together on Saturdays, correct? Did Tony make it up quite a bit from Rochester?
Tony's coming up this week with his son. Mike lives here in Granger. His son, Brandon, is coming in. My son, Riley, is coming in. So there's a lot of people coming in for this game. Everybody and their brother wants to come to this game.
And I have a question for that later about how you have to be a ticket broker up there in South Bend. But Chris, turning over to you, we're from LaPorte. We live real close to South Bend, 35 minutes away, 25 minutes if Mike Libator, our friend, is driving. How did you first become a fan of the Irish?
You know, I don't have any real idea because for as long as I can remember, I was a Notre Dame fan, and I grew up in a Purdue family. Everybody went to Purdue. My dad went to IU med school, so we had no connections to the university at all. And my first memory is I think I was about 6 years old. I was watching Notre Dame play Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, way back in like 1973, and my parents were just looking at this weird kid that was cheering for Notre Dame, and for whatever reason, I just always liked them, and it's continued on my entire lifetime.
Take us back to high school, those good old days as a LaPorte Slicer, and what drove you to attend Notre Dame? You know, with your scores and everything, you probably could have gone anywhere in the country. Why did you decide to stay close to home at Notre Dame?
Well, I love to tell this little story. Notre Dame was the only school that would take me. When I was in high school and I was doing okay, and I wanted to go to a more selective school, I thought, but I also wanted to get away from home. So I only applied to 3 schools. I applied to Notre Dame, Georgetown, and Duke. And I only got accepted at Notre Dame. I applied there early decision. So I knew before Christmas that I was in. And I just look at it as it was just fate that the other schools were like, no, you need to go to Notre Dame. So I didn't apply to any other schools. And the biggest drawback for Notre Dame was that it was 35 minutes from my parents' house. But I made it as far away as possible, as college kids are likely to do.
You know, now that you mentioned, I think I remember us talking about that, how you might have wanted to get away in your college decision. But I bet you're glad you made the decision to go to Notre Dame.
Well, it would be terrible if you have to be a fan or a friend with a Dookie. You know, that would really be bad. But you can at least tolerate Notre Dame, so we appreciate that.
Yeah, as a basketball guy, falling out of favor with Coach K. That it's been bad enough with you guys being Irish fans and wearing a jersey in your support today. So let's go to this is a big game Saturday. But Jeff, you've attended probably hundreds of games right now. Chris, you have too over the years. Is there any 1 or 2 games that really stand out that you were in attendance for? We'll go to you first, Jeff.
You know, obviously, the Miami game was a very special rivalry, the Catholics versus convicts game, and that was just an unbelievable atmosphere. That was back in the day when I would say Notre Dame fans really got into it. You know, Notre Dame doesn't have that fan backing of a loud stadium that something like Nebraska or LSU, but you know, going back to that Miami game, that's when really the fans are really back into that game. You know, it's going to be loud this weekend for Michigan. Don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be as loud as it was for that Miami game.
Chris, your favorite game or a couple of favorite games?
Yeah, obviously I would echo what Jeff says. That was my senior year, and Miami was our hated rival because they had beaten us 58-7 my freshman year. So that was the game, and as very well documented by my friend Pat Creedon in that 30 for 30. But I'll throw out a couple that others might not think about. Lou Holtz's first game was against Michigan, and Jim Harbaugh was the quarterback for Michigan. And Notre Dame outplayed them up and down the field, and we lost 24-23. But walking out of that stadium, everyone had the same feeling, which was, we're back. You know, even though we lost, it was just an incredible game, incredible atmosphere, and everybody knew that Holtz was going to get this done. And then the other game that I always like to talk to people about because they don't really think about it is my junior year, so 1987, we played Alabama. And both teams were in the top 10, and it was a big game, and it started at like 4 in the afternoon. And as Jeff said, the crowds back then were louder. In fact, in 1988, my senior year, the student body got a penalty on it for being too loud. You can go check that on YouTube. But the Alabama game my junior year was like the perfect time because tailgating had gone on just long enough, but not too long. And we wound up winning like 38-7 or something. We just destroyed Alabama, which is always a good day. And that may be the loudest I ever heard that stadium that night.
So there's a few games. Now we're talking about a rivalry. You guys at Notre Dame have several rivalries, but this Michigan game has been a tremendous rivalry over the years that took a few years off since I think the last game was 2014. And so, and that was a Notre Dame victory, 31-0 at Notre Dame. So the game this year is back at Notre Dame, correct? It's a home game, I think.
That's right.
Jeff, you're finding tickets all over the place. Any particular game, Jeff, against Michigan that comes to mind as one that you will remember?
Well, obviously that last one. I mean, putting up a goose egg against Michigan at home really felt good. You know, I've been up to the big house when we played and seen us get our butts kicked and lose when you know we had a chance to win. And you know, that's a great college atmosphere, but Michigan fans up at the big house are not very friendly. That's for sure.
Nice place to watch a game unless you're the visitors. At least you guys are Notre Dame. When Indiana goes up there, there's no chance of winning that thing. So that's tough. Chris, any particular Michigan game stand out for you?
Well, several. In '87, we went up there. It was my junior year, and a bunch of the students went up there, and we wound up winning. And a few of us ran out on the field, so we were on the Michigan field after winning there, so that felt good. But the biggest one for me, and I'm always going to come back to this year, was my senior year. So 1988, that was the infamous Reggie Ho game. He kicked 4 field goals, and then Michigan had a field goal to win it at the end of the game. And a little story for you. I was in the band, as you mentioned, and we sat on the opposite corner from the students. And Mike Gillette's field goal for Michigan was going to the opposite end, so towards the south end. So he pushed it right, and we could see that from the band. But the students on the other side, it looked good to them the whole time. And so my friends told me afterwards, they said, we were sure it was good until we looked down, we saw the band going crazy, and we knew that he'd missed it. And then the referees waved their arms, no good. So that game under the lights, for me, I'm getting chills just telling you the story.
That was a 19-17 Notre Dame victory over Michigan. It was the second in a row for you when you were in college. You had lost the first 2, as I'm looking at the record.
Yep.
And that was the first win for you at Notre Dame Stadium to watch that while you were in college. And that was a 5 out of 7 years Notre Dame goes on to win. There was one tie in there, 5-1-1 over those years. So that was quite the winning streak. The overall record is 16-19-1 for the Irish against Michigan. So this Saturday they look to add their 17th victory. So, Jeff, we're going to come to you. You have lived in South Bend ever since you got out of law school and have been a big part of that community and a big part of the Notre Dame community. What kind of activities and things do you do in town and for the university that support Notre Dame athletics?
Well, game weekend, it's always neat to see all the people who come in. You meet a lot of people. We used to have the quarterback club the Fridays before. Now that's no longer in existence, but that was another tradition. You have people coming in town, seeing them at the bars, bucket list people who think they've died and gone to heaven just to be on campus, going to the grotto, going to the basilica, walking the campus. And just being on campus, it's so amazing. Chris will tell you, the drummers drum off at midnight, Friday night, and just the atmosphere around campus starting, this week, probably with game day being here, it's going to be rocking, I'm sure, Wednesday at Eddy Street Commons. It's a newer development with some restaurant and bars, a bookstore there. Just seeing people, you could tell that they're out of town because the way they're dressed. But that atmosphere around campus, I'm sure probably starting Wednesday, even though it's a night game, is going to be unbelievable.
Jeff, I might need to send you to the grotto for something that I did about 30 years ago. When I kind of mistakenly walked through the grotto, not knowing the significance of what the grotto was. I apologize to all Notre Dame people and everyone up there. It might not have been. That was one of my most embarrassing moments in my young life, but we won't share that with the podcast, what exactly I said or did, but I've asked for forgiveness almost every Sunday since. Talk about your tailgate. You've been nice enough in the past 10 years. I've been up a couple times, and you have an awesome tailgate spot. How do you and your family organize your tailgate and decide what to do and what to bring with as many guests as you have on a given Saturday?
Well, it's a well-oiled machine. I'm the quarterback and just kind of direct some people, but we have 5 or 6 families. The guys will get up and we'll be parked at 7 in the morning, even though it's a 7:30 game. The guys will get the tent set up, tables and everything, and the wives come out and bring the food, and everybody has a responsibility, and everybody takes that responsibility serious because I don't even care if you're a Michigan fan. Well, I do, but we're still going to give you a cold beer. We're still going to give you a sandwich. We're going to treat you, with respect. And then we're going to kick your ass on the field, and we'll give you a beer after the game. But everybody has a responsibility. And we have a lot of people we serve, so we don't have like the Tonsoni menu, to have out there change every week as to who you're playing as an opponent. But we try to mix it up, and everybody tries to one up one another as to what they're going to bring. But we have everything from burgers, brats, chicken, Porta Pit Nelsons. They're a good supplier of us. My good friends there help us out with their potatoes and their chicken. But we've also done other things that are kind of unique. And so we share those responsibilities, and usually one family takes it over. But with Michigan, you have to serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner because it's going to be a long day. And so we kind of share up those responsibilities, throw up the grill, and it's game on as soon as we start. Get the table set up. It's a marathon. It's not a race, so you got to be careful how much you drink. So.
You ever run out of beer? As many people as you serve, and as nice as you are, every time I've come up there, I've seen like half the town of LaPorte is at your tailgate, and there's got to be 2/3 of South Bend because you're darn near the mayor right now. Do you have like a beer distributor on call just to like bring an emergency couple cases of beer? Have you ever run out?
Knock on wood, we have not run out of beer, and that's a joke between the Stesiak boys because Mike ran out of beer one time at a holiday function. He'll never live that down. So I just make sure we always have a stash just in case we get low that we're able to throw it in. And the people around us, if we would ever, God forbid, get to that point, the guys we tailgate for a number of years help one another out where they need a wine opener, a burger, or some mixed drinks or something. It's a well-oiled machine, like I said, even with the people around us.
Well, one of my favorite memories of a game not at Notre Dame but at IU is I think it might have been senior weekend or whatever. At halftime we were out of beer, and the next thing I know, Dad's running to the Bloomington Liquors there on the corner of the bypass to restock us. So I know how that goes. But Jeff, your tailgate is really awesome. I know people look forward to it. You have a great spot near the stadium, and your generosity is fantastic. And it's a reason that us guys from LaPorte, I think we stick together and we take care of each other. But you do a good job in taking care of people, not just on Saturdays, but throughout your life. And talking about taking care of people, tickets. I mean, tickets have to be hard to come by on these big games. And then everyone that you know and have met once or twice has probably been getting a hold of you trying to find tickets. Talk about how hard a ticket, the Notre Dame ticket is.
Well, obviously with the stadium expansion, the price of tickets have gone up. Notre Dame's gone to the prices of tickets depending upon the game. I think the most expensive ticket this week is $250. So, the one thing that I've always done and always will not do is scalp tickets. I've got a pipeline of people that I take care of and they take care of me. And so if somebody needs tickets, I think my list, the last time I counted up, I've got 40 to 50 requests for tickets this week. And I was able to take care of my law partner. He needed 25, so I had to take care of him first. But everybody and their brother wants to come to this game. And so it's just, we put everybody on the list, and then once the tickets start coming, then we start doling them out. But for the most part, it really hasn't been, no one has not gotten into the game. The Georgia ticket was a hot ticket. This weekend, it's a harder ticket. I looked on Vivid. The cheapest ticket I saw, it was in the upper deck, which are probably about $120 tickets. Those were going for $250. So there's a markup, and that's good for Notre Dame football because there's an interest. But obviously we don't want the Georgia Red to be taking over the stadium this weekend because that those Michigan people will pay that kind of money to get in our stadium.
Yep. Chris, coming to you now for a few questions. You attended Notre Dame, lived in a dorm with several players. We talked about this over dinner a couple weeks ago. What was it like to be on campus and have a close-knit campus where the athletes and the student body interacted? What was that like during your college career?
It was incredible, and I can't imagine it being any different. Like, I know at some schools they used to have athletic dorms, or most of the athletes kind of live by themselves. And it was just so great to have these Division I athletes, these incredible athletes, some of whom were going to go play in the NFL, they had 8 a.m. class with you. And, when you're going to take a shower before the 8 a.m. class, they're just as groggy and cranky as the rest of us. They didn't want to go either. But you'd see them and you'd get to know them a little bit. And what I always remember is the amount of time those guys put in. That, like on a football weekend, Jeff was alluding to this earlier, and it used to be even more so. The campers used to show up about 7 a.m. about 7 a.m. on Thursday, and they'd stay all weekend. And so the weekend was kind of starting early. But those guys, they had to go practice and they had to keep up with their classes. But the rest of us, it was kind of on starting on Thursday. But then Sunday, we would catch up. Well, Sunday, they would go watch film, lift weights, do that sort of thing when the rest of us were catching up from the past few days. So I just always admired how much time they committed to it. And I think what that does is it gives you a real appreciation for the amount of effort that those guys put in. And I don't think I would have had that had I not lived in the dorm with them. Plus, it just brings you all closer as a campus community. Notre Dame is not as big as most people think. There's only about 8,000 undergrad. So it's really cool to have the athletes right there in your dorm with you.
Which player, and we talked about this with games too, there's probably several you could answer, but was there a player or two that stood out that was easiest to talk to during your time on campus?
Of people that people would know, players that people would know, Tony Rice is always the name that comes to mind because Tony was the most down-to-earth guy, the most gracious guy with his time. You could meet him and be talking to him, and he wouldn't tell you he was the starting quarterback for Notre Dame. And he never put on airs like that.
He will now. He will now, though.
Okay. He didn't back then, and maybe he was humbled a little bit because he was a Prop 48 kid. But he lived in my dorm. I wasn't friends with him, but he certainly knew me and knew my nickname. And we played basketball sometimes at the Rock together or against each other. But he was always very approachable, just to talk to as a normal student.
Now, he was a quarterback on the national championship team, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So you're in a marching band, and I'm going to tell my favorite memory of your marching band days, and then I'll let turn it through. But first of all, there's nothing better than the fight song and all of the music that you guys played, and the marches and the clogs and all of that stuff. It's just tradition, and I always loved the step off when you did. I hope I used the right terms when you had uniform inspection, and then you guys had to be silent and stare ahead, and your friends are spraying you with water, and we're all yelling at you, trying to get you to crack a smile, and then all of a sudden, bam! The band takes off. And I tell you what, I know you guys get a lot of grief sometimes. There's either those fans that love Notre Dame or hate Notre Dame. You go on campus and you can't help but be fired up when those kind of traditions take off. And the band concert and all that has been a part of what I've enjoyed on my few trips up to Notre Dame for football games. But I enjoyed watching you a couple of times on those Saturday afternoons as you prepared for the Notre Dame. So what was it like to be a member of a band that has some of the greatest fight song traditions? And was there a particular memory of your marching or travels that stands out?
Yeah, I could take the rest of the podcast telling you stories from the band, but you're right. The inspection, the concert on the steps, those are things that not everybody knows about. But if you're, Jeff mentioned earlier, the bucket list, if you're just going to campus one time, you should definitely try to see the inspection and step off. And because you're right, there's just so much energy that builds up over that time. As far as specific memories, the bowl games were great. We went to the Cotton Bowl my junior year. We went to the Fiesta Bowl my senior year. So those were pretty incredible to get, good receptions from the fans at those bowl games. Gosh, we went to Pittsburgh a couple times. I can tell you a really bad story was bad for the Irish, but it's a funny story now, 30 years later. We played Penn State our freshman year, which turned out to be the final game or second to last game for Jerry Faust. And we drove out to Penn State, and anyone who's ever gone to Penn State knows there's no place close to stay when you go to Penn State. So we were in some little burg in the middle of Pennsylvania, and it's pouring down rain. Then and I'm sick. It's freshman year. I'm run down, and so we get on the bus, go like an hour to Penn State's campus. It's raining the whole time. Just as we're getting there, they say, "Hey, guess what? You guys aren't going to get to perform. So you're going to stand in the bleachers or stand in the stands the whole time, and just play there. But you're not going to get to go out on the field, and neither is the Penn State band because Paterno's worried he's going to tear up the field." All right. It was about 35 degrees and raining and windy, and it was an absolute massacre. So we're standing there, and I could fill up the whole podcast with stories from that day because I just sat there and I made a vow to never again complain about being too hot because I was so cold I could barely move. And we're losing, I think it was 38-0 or 36-0, something like that. And we score with like 6 seconds to go in the game. So it's now 36-6, and all we want to do is get on the bus and go home. And the drum majors hop up and they're like, "All right, we got to play the fight song." We were all looking at them like, "You guys have lost your mind. We're not playing the fight song. We just want to go home." It was awful, but that's a very vivid memory, obviously, from my band days. And I'm so glad that I did that. Brian, you and I were in the band together in high school. I had no intention of being in the band in college. I was not a serious musician, but most of the people in the marching band were not. I think there was one music major in my 4 years that was in the marching band. It was just a bunch of regular students that had played in high school and thought it might be a cool thing to perform in front of 60,000 people. So we had a great time, had a lot of fun with it, and obviously lots of great memories.
What's it like going through that tunnel? I just want to do that. And I know I just saw in doing some research that on Fridays they open it up to the public to go down through the tunnel. But what's it like going through that tunnel?
Well, what's funny is it depends on the game, because there were some games like you come out of the tunnel, we're doing our trot and getting ready and everything, and there's 47 people in the stands because everyone's still out tailgating, having a good time, and we're playing Ole Miss back when they were terrible or something, and everybody's just like, "Yeah, we'll get there when we get there." But then when you play Miami in 1988 and you come out of the tunnel and the crowd is already in their seats and the place just explodes. Again, I'm getting chills just telling you the story. It's an awesome feeling. It makes it all worth it. All the extra hours you put in and the practice and the drudgery of that, it's all worth it when 60,000 people are cheering for you to play the fight song.
And you were close to that fisticuffs too in that tunnel for that game, weren't you? I know you would go on and on, but you were, correct?
As a trombone player, yeah, I was in the A row, and so we were right up there, right by where the teams go to the locker rooms, and we could tell there was something going on. And the next thing you know, there's all this commotion, and then we see these police escorting the Miami team into their locker room and the Notre Dame team into their locker room, and those guys were hooting and hollering. And we said, "Oh boy, this is not your normal game," which we already knew. I mean, we already knew it was on.
Okay, so let's move on to some traditions. Notre Dame is full of traditions. I'm going to ask just 4 questions to see what you guys like. Jeff, we're coming to you first. Do you like the green jerseys?
Boy, that Bucks tradition. Notre Dame hasn't done well in the green. I will say this. I know there's a few people who know I like to, place a little wager, but put your wager on that Notre Dame is not going to wear green jerseys this weekend. So the stands are going to be green, but the team is not going to be wearing green. So, it worked for USC, but I don't think it's going to work anymore.
I should ask you guys what you think of the pinstripe jerseys that came out for the game in New York. Chris, any thoughts on those uniforms?
Okay, so this is the 51-year-old guy speaking. They're horrific, but you know what? They're not for me. They're for the kids. And a few years ago, the Shamrock Series was in Indianapolis, and I took my son, and Notre Dame had these weird-looking uniforms, and his words were, "Dad, those are tight." And I'm like, that's right. They're for the teenagers and they love them. So, hey, as long as they win, I really don't care what they're wearing.
Chris, this one's for you. Fight song or alma mater? Which one do you like the best? That's tough, I think.
Wow, that's a tough one. But I'll go with alma mater just because it's more, what's the right word? If you went there, you know it. If you didn't go there, you probably don't. And I think that's okay to have something that's a little special just for those people that were there.
And for those of our listeners who aren't true Notre Dame fans, that's when the team gets near the student section. The band plays that after every game. And that's a pretty awesome experience too. Jeff, share a little bit about the pep sessions on Friday night. That's a special Notre Dame tradition. What goes on at these pep sessions?
You know that they've kind of moved them around, and I'm not really sure where it's going to be this weekend, but you know, they've had Coach Kelly and some of the players speak, and when it's definitely on campus at the dorms, that's where you usually get the best turnout, because it is about the students and it is about the Notre Dame students. You know, they do have a small, I'm not sure the full band comes out, but part of the band does come out, and the cheerleaders, and it really fires up everybody. You know, they've had them inside the Joyce Center too, and where everybody is invited, and that really gets the place rocking. So it's a good start Friday night before the weekend. You know, the team gets on the bus and heads to the hotel, and so they're out of sight. But it does start the Friday night and then into Saturday, whether it's a day or night game. Pretty awesome.
Hey, Brian, can I jump in on that?
Sure.
So when I was in school, the pep sessions were all out on this little rec center on the north end of campus called Steppen Center. And I don't even know if Steppen is still there or not. They talked about tearing it down, but it was just a sweat box. And the pep sessions back then, the word I used they were just raw. Like it was crazy. Like the tailgating had really started on campus about 4 o'clock when the classes were done. The band, we had practice until about 6. Pep sessions were at 7. So we had about a 45-minute window to try to catch up to what everyone else had been doing since 4 o'clock. And we called those pre-rallies. So we hit it hard for about 45 minutes, and then we'd run back to the band hall, get our instruments, and march to Steppen Center. And when we walked in, you know, it would be about 150 degrees in there, and then the band would come in playing, and it was just raw emotion, and it was not scripted. They were crazy, and like Jeff said, it was all about the students and everybody there. You walked out of those things back then, and you wanted the game to start 10 minutes later. I mean, you were ready to go. And I haven't been back for a number of years because I went to one when my brother was a student there, and it had become very commercial and very scripted because it's like, come see the Notre Dame pep session. And I watched it and I'm like, this is not a Notre Dame pep session. So I just wanted to interject that because I think it's a lot different than it used to be.
And they got to be different without Lou Holtz. You know?
Yeah, he's one of a kind, right?
I think I'd walk through a wall for Lou Holtz, and I don't know that I really like him.
Yeah, he was good. He'd always visit the band at the beginning of each season too, and he'd get you all fired up for the season. And yeah, he unbelievable. I mean, he'll always be a god to us because he took us from the depths to the top of the mountain in 3 years.
Yeah. You guys like the tradition of the shirt that's been around now, what, 20 years or so, maybe?
It's Jeff? All right. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. They really, like someone says, why don't you just make it white, and let's have a white out or something. The colors haven't been a standout color for many years. And, it is a nice tradition. It does raise the funds for the students. So, but they just don't, I don't think they accomplish what they hope to accomplish by having the shirt.
As we start wrapping it up, we're talking Notre Dame football here with Chris Hagenow and Jeff Stesiak, and we just have a few more questions for you guys as fans. Who's the biggest rivalry or rivalries that you look forward to playing or hope that Notre Dame schedules on a regular basis, and you just want to beat the tar out of? We'll start with you, Chris.
Well, for me, it's always Southern Cal. And that goes back to when I was like 7 years old and they beat us 55-24, and I've hated them ever since. So for me, they're always the biggest rival. I mentioned earlier that come from a Purdue family, and so when we played them regularly, I really needed to win that game, because if I didn't, it was not fun the rest of the year. So those are the two that come to mind for sure. And Miami was that huge rival when I was at school, but then they went away for a long time. So I don't feel the same way as I do about Southern Cal. Jeff, the biggest rivalries for you?
Well, obviously, Chris, you weren't at the Miami game like I was last year, so you might hate them as much. But that was more on the field than it was their fans. But their fans were kind of obnoxious. But there's no question, Brian. It's Michigan, and it's Michigan because I hate Michigan. I hate the way they treat us when we're up there, and there's no team I want to beat better than Michigan. So, it's a great rivalry to get back at Tennessee, but the Tennessee people were very nice and very cordial, and that would be a nice rivalry to get back up. And LSU too. I mean, LSU, their fans were, cheering that we were tiger bait until we beat them. That was Bob Davies' year, but there's no question about it. Michigan's the biggest rivalry.
So you mentioned Bob Davie. We're going to talk about favorite coaches of your fandom. And I'm not sure Bob Davie would make the call for either of you two guys, but let's go to you, Jeff. Your favorite coach?
Brian, there's a lot of attorney-client privileges that I'd have to waive to say which one would be my favorite. But
okay, so that's all personal on
that. But I'll tell you what. I mean, I had dealings with all those guys, and they all have their personal tidbits and quirks, but when you're behind the scene and you get to know them, each one of those guys are very loyal and very friendly outside their persona. Brian Kelly, I consider a friend of mine. I still consider Charlie Weiss a good friend of mine. I still consider Tyrone Willingham a friend of mine. I didn't have that much involvement with Bob Davie other than the luncheons, but he was always very cordial. And so, to pick one of those, and even Lou Holtz. I mean, Lou Holtz hated those luncheons, but, as soon as he left and went to South Carolina, he called up and his athletic director said, "Hey, coach wants to do the luncheons." I'm like, he complained and bitched and moaned about those luncheons, and now he wants to do the same thing that he did at Notre Dame. I had a few kind words with him when he came back for a function, charity function in South Bend a couple of years ago. But, I really can't say I pick one because each of them have been very special to me. And, even a couple have gone above and beyond, but we'll just leave it at that.
That's, I appreciate that as a coach myself. A lot of fans get to see you on game day, or they see you in the media sessions. And when you get to work with people and get to know them personally, you know that they're people too. And every coach that's been at Notre Dame's trying to win football games. There's not a one of them that purposely took the job with an idea of not being successful. And as a fellow coach, and that I like to hear that from a fan base, Jeff. So thank you very much for all coaches, and especially for those Notre Dame coaches. Chris, your favorite coach?
Yeah, I don't have the personal interaction that Jeff's had, so I'll just leave mine to what I witnessed as a coach. And so we talked about Lou before. Obviously, he'll have a special place for my entire class and all the students who were there during his tenure. But the other one, being a lifelong fan, was Era. Era Parsegian has an amazing record if you go look at it, and he was he just personified class, right up until his last days. And he stayed in South Bend, and he was a member out at South Bend Country Club. And if you ever saw him out there, he'd come up and talk to you just like you were the most important person in the world. And he met my son and talked to him. And I mean, Era, I think, was really a special person. And then all of the things he did for his grandchildren and raising money. But again, looking at just from my memories from football, it would be Era and Lou.
That's good. Favorite player or favorite player performance? Is there one performance that sticks out in your time of watching games, or is there a player that you really enjoyed? I know Chris said off the air that it's kind of hard to come up with maybe just one when you followed for 20, 30 years. Jeff, is there one player or particular performance in a game that sticks out to you?
You know, to try and pick one player, one performance, it'd be hard for me. But the two people who really stick out, and maybe because it is recent, Kyle Rudolph is probably one of the nicest, most generous guys that would give his shirt off his back. And he even the fame and fortune that he has, and currently in the success that he has, hasn't changed him one bit. And I also see that in a person of Mike McGlinchey. I got to know him while he was here, and every time I saw him, hi, Mr. Stesiak, and it just kind of personifies the type of athletes that come out and the professionalism and the cordialness and the politeness that Notre Dame puts out, and these guys are really special. So, you know, Kyle Rudolph is probably one of my favorites, and I still, you know, have contact with him, but he would be my number one.
Chris?
Yeah, I'll stick to on the field, and I agree with what Jeff said. You know, it's hard to pick one, and there's so many incredible performances. I know when I was growing up, we had a tight end named Ken McAfee back in the 70s that then played in the pros a little while and then became a dentist out in San Francisco. I just loved watching him play. Then when I was there, the best player that I saw was Tim Brown. And as far as a specific performance, you know, that my junior year, his senior year, he returned consecutive punts for touchdowns against Michigan State, which is just unheard of. I mean, that just doesn't happen. And he did that. So I'll always remember that. Jerome Bettis was another guy that from the very beginning, I just said, there's something special about this guy, just watching him play. But so many incredible performances over the years. And, you know, the last one I'll just remind people is Joe Montana. Had all those comebacks over the years, and then that he finished it with that game in the Cotton Bowl against Houston. I remember that game. You know, we were 11, 12 years old, something, and I was just jumping around going crazy. And my poor dad, the Purdue fan, was just like, "What is wrong with my child?" But those are some things that just kind of stick out as memorable for me.
Your thoughts, Jeff, on this year's team? What are you looking forward to? It's starting Saturday night.
Well, I mean, Saturday night starts the season, and it's an important game for both teams. I think Notre Dame has to win that game. You know, if they win that game, they're sitting very pretty for the national championship run. If they lose that game, it's going to be hard for them to get back into the talk. So you know, I consider it a must-win if they have national championship plans.
And Chris?
I agree with everything Jeff just said. Anytime you replace two All-American offensive linemen, first-round draft picks, that's going to make me nervous because you don't know what their replacements are going to be like. And I'm concerned about our quarterback and his accuracy. And Michigan has a great defense, even though they've struggled on offense the last couple of years. They've always been great on defense, and I think it could be a really low-scoring game. And yeah, we'll see. And Harbaugh has a way of getting teams ready for these big games.
I'm just kind of hoping that it's a great experience for all, and that at least one person has to hitchhike back to where they stay because they've had such a great experience.
Oh, come on now.
So we've reached the end of our show tonight. I want to thank Jeff Stesiak and Chris Hagenow for joining me. And whether you love Notre Dame or not, you cannot deny the awesome traditions. This Saturday night will be Much Watch TV if you are not in South Bend and at the game. Thanks for listening to Sports Talk with Tonsoni. For Chris Hagenow, Jeff Stesiak, I am Brian Tonsoni saying, play like champions every day. So long.